I want to thank Reverend Larry King for being here today to do both the reading and the message. He's such a gifted speaker, and I love his jokes and his personal stories. And I also want to acknowledge Karen Drucker and our CSL music team for the fabulous music that supports the message today. This month of March, our theme is Choosing to Live. And our topic today, chaos, is crisis plus opportunity. Now, I don't know about you, but when chaos shows up in my life, my first thought is not, oh goody, an opportunity. It's likely more like, why is this happening and how fast can I move through it? Or how fast can I make it stop? Ernest Holmes taught us that life is always seeking to express more of itself through us. And sometimes that expression disrupts what we thought was stable. Dr. Reverend Larry King is here today to remind us with stories and a beautiful message how to change the chaos and the crisis in our lives to opportunity. Before I give you over to Reverend Larry, allow me to give you your question for the week. What is the one choice you might make today to accept what you resist persists? To see crisis as upcycled chaos and to leverage chaos and crisis into opportunity. One more time. What is the one choice you might make today to accept what you resist persists, to see crisis as upcycled chaos, and to leverage chaos and crisis into opportunity? And now, enjoy the message of Dr. Reverend Larry King.
Hi, everyone. The other Reverend Larry asked me back to talk to one of my favorite groups. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And I still remember some of the fun that a few of us had in New Orleans a few years back. Well, anyway, I lucked out. Here I am. And it's also one of my favorite topics. My talk today is about chaos, crisis, and opportunity. Now, often we find ourselves in the midst of what appears to be chaos, and frequently it can descend into crisis. Well, today I hope to give you some spiritual wisdom when you find yourself in those situations, and also some practical advice for getting out of them. But you know me, I think one of the best places to start is with a joke. So it's about three men in a bar. A doctor, an engineer, and a politician were drinking in a bar, and the conversation got quite rowdy for a point, and they began arguing over the oldest profession. But wait, it's not what you think. The doctor said, in the Bible, Eve was made from Adam's rib. So the first profession was obviously a surgeon. Well, the engineer disagreed and said, God made the earth from chaos in 7 days. So engineering is the first profession. Well, the politician just smiled. He said, who do you think made the chaos? So I know you're thinking, oh my Lord, he's back with his jokes. But I think what reminded me of this joke is the idea that we often make our own chaos, right? Is it really thrust upon us, or do we play a part in the chaos that we find ourselves in? So the dictionary definition of chaos is complete disorder and confusion. But as Science of Mind folks, we're ready to ask, okay, but what if I just can't see the order? What if the confusion is temporary? What is my role, in fact, in helping to create this? And so I'd like to start with saying there's no great harm in chaos and that we can just go with it. We're always going to have some point of confusion and chaos in our lives. It's the human condition. And unless it devolves into some kind of actual crisis, I say just put up with it. And if you can, accept it for what it is. It's not the end point. There will come clarity. You will be able to make your way through a certain amount of chaos. I just think about it as things that happen for no apparent reason, and I'm stronger than chaos. In fact, this last week, I'll use an example. This last week, I used an online service to figure out and file my income taxes. Well, I got to tell you, it was complete chaos. Why is it different this year? Where are all my receipts? Why am I missing 1099 forms that should have been sent to me? And yet in the end, I figured it out. And so the confusion was cleared and put all my data into the forms, which was bringing order to it. And I filed them, and everything is fine. But oh my gosh, initially there was that urge to like, I don't want to be doing this. This is complicated. I don't understand it all. Both the idea of confusion and chaos. But I think that's kind of a typical one, isn't it? When we're faced with things in the unknown. And I think that's the key here, right? Now, I did not enjoy the chaos, but I also knew that I was not alone and that step by step I would be able to be successful in the midst of it. And so I would suggest that we treat occasional chaos as expected. We're just going to have it. We will always be presented with things that are out of our comfort zone. Change is not easy, but also remember, and here's the first spiritual principle I want to introduce you to today. And I don't think it's new, but the idea that what you resist will persist. So I filed my taxes a whole month early. I could have waited until the last minute. I could have done everything possible to resist filing my taxes. And in fact, in previous years, I've been upset enough with the chaos of it that that's what I did, or I turned it over to someone else to do it for me. So what you resist will persist. Instead of resisting my taxes, it's just like, okay, I think I have all of the data I need for it. Let's just sit down and get it through. I accept that it may be confusing. I accept that there may be chaos involved, but I might as well just get it done. Okay, so that's so much for chaos. But what about when chaos turns to crisis? Again, I think we might use a dictionary definition. Crisis is a time of intense difficulty, trouble, or in danger. And of course, this feels like an immediate call for action, right? Anything to get away from or to solve this problem. You don't want to have the car repossessed. You want to get away from a troubling relationship right now. You would do anything to avoid this health crisis. But notice this is kind of just how do I want to call it? Upcycled chaos, right? And in the same way that we don't want to deny the chaos is going on, I think likewise, we can start by recognizing the crisis that we're in. We can know that Spirit is always here to help us. We're not going to be defeated by it. We know that we probably have friends and family and our spiritual center that can likewise help us out. And so rather than being overwhelmed by crisis, rather than feeling depressed by it, let's think of it as just something to go through. Something maybe more difficult than filing your taxes, certainly, but a crisis too is a time of thinking about how we can move through something, maybe just one step at a time, and to come up perhaps with a better result than what we had before. And so this, of course, leads me into the main part of my talk today. And that is that we can actually leverage chaos and even crisis into an opportunity. So let's talk about that. I know some of you are saying, oh, please, you haven't seen my crises. Well, it's true, but I have been through some sticky times in my life. And I have, I think, learned to actually look past the problem into an opportunity or a solution. So let's talk about leveraging chaos and crisis. Yes, we can turn to these situations into something positive. First, I want to remind you, here's the second spiritual principle for today, that good enough is an enemy of the great. Okay, let me say that again. You're probably thinking, what? What did he say? Okay, so good enough is the enemy of the great. So let me explain. So often we're in crisis. We just want to get things back to the way it was before. We just want to get out of the crisis so that we're back into our same old life. But do you understand that means there was no room here for improvement? It's just getting back to the way things were. So, what if instead of wishing to just exercise control to get things back to it was before the chaos or the crisis, what if we thought of this as an opportunity? What if we thought rather than going back to our lives when it was good enough, what if we wanted this particular time of chaos or crisis, what if we wanted this to turn into an opportunity? So chaos and crisis present a unique time to forge a new path that can lead to something even better. So I think I should give you a couple examples here. Well, first, back to my taxes. So what was also the opportunity here? I saved $400. I've never tried to do, well, not in the last 20 years, tried to do my taxes myself. I just was bogged down with the confusion that it represented, with the crazy tax forms and all that. And so, first of all, yes, it seemed like chaos, but it also was an opportunity. I saved $400, which is a lovely thing to have in my pocket. And I gave myself the confidence so that I know I can do it again next year. I will have no trouble doing my taxes on again next year. But let's talk about something a little more tough. Let's talk about a real crisis situation. Um, well, some of you know that I have been diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer, and this came about, I guess, almost 4 years ago. And the treatment at that time that I went through was 42 days in a row of radiation therapy. So I would go in at the same time every day, and they would kind of strap me into this machine and get everything kind of calibrated. And then they would give me a radiation treatment. And in the beginning, I was driving myself and everything was fine. I was having a little trouble sleeping right from the beginning. But I want to tell you, about halfway through, I started just getting tireder and tireder and tireder. And I want to tell you about one of my particular sessions. So I drove myself in and got parked and had my treatment. And surprisingly, I just felt amazingly tired right then. And they said that it was time for me to go get some blood work done as well. So I left the clinic, and the blood work is just done in another part of the clinic. It's just so outside, up a set of stairs and into the lab where they would do the clinic. So the blood draw, I mean. So I went outside and I started walking up the stairs, and suddenly I just couldn't go any further. And I kind of stumbled down two of the stairs, and there luckily was a cement bench out there. And I just sat on the bench and felt this overwhelming crisis descend upon me. And I thought to myself, you fool, you can't even go up the flight of stairs. You probably can't even get out to the parking lot. So initially, of course, my fear, or my short-term opportunity, maybe is another way of looking at it, is how the heck am I going to get out of here? But it was a nice day, and there was a little courtyard there with nice plantings and flowers. And so I thought, let me just enjoy this moment. Let me catch my breath. The tiredness seems overwhelming, but let's just sit here a minute and see what happens. And so I just sat there. I didn't even get my cell phone out and, make a cry for help or dial 911 or anything like that. I just sat there and enjoyed the flowers for a minute. And for some reason, I just wasn't worried. Here I was in the midst of a crisis, certainly chaos, and I wasn't worried. I knew that Spirit had my back. I knew that the world was on my side. And before long, sure enough, this woman came by. She had a name badge on, so I knew she worked there at the clinic. And she said, "Are you doing okay?" She said, "You don't look entirely well." And so I explained what had happened. I explained that I was supposed to go up to have my blood draw, but I just wasn't sure that I was up to it. And so she said, "You just wait here." And you could tell she was just the kindest person in the world. And sure enough, before too long, a nice gentleman in a wheelchair came and they took me clear around the whole campus instead of taking the steps up. And I got my lab work done, and they were kind enough to call my partner who came and got me so that I didn't have to drive. And what I realized, and I know this sounds odd because you might say, well, Larry, you were still in crisis. You had, another dozen or two more treatments to have. But I think what I realized was in that instant was I had the opportunity to let the world help me. And so from then on, I didn't drive myself. Either a roommate or my partner drove me. Um, People helped me to do the labs. Um, I used it as an opportunity also at work. This was when I still had my congregation in Portland. And so someone in the congregation very happily found people to fill in for me on Sundays at the center. And it really was an opportunity of growth for me. I wasn't used to taking people's help. I wasn't used to being that person that needed help. And so, what an opportunity to learn more about myself. So, what an opportunity to learn about myself. What an opportunity to learn about my community, about my friends, about my circle of people who were there to care for me. And of course, everything in the end turned out fine, right? The radiation was over and life moved on. But truly, a crisis, I think I just allowed God to help me take care of it. I allowed myself to have that moment on the bench, knowing that everything would be okay. And everything was okay. So I urge you not to be defeated by a crisis, not to somehow be disheartened by chaos. I think we have to accept whatever happens to us, and then we begin to think of the positive outcomes. And I want to share maybe a third science of mind principle with you. Have you ever asked yourself, what if everything just goes right? I know so often we spin ourselves into doubt and we spin ourselves into worry. And the worry usually is, well, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And the worst case scenario, right? We're actually kind of asking for a crisis. We're kind of asking for more chaos. But I want to leave you with this thought. What if everything goes right? And so let's recap here. We covered two or three spiritual principles today. One, what you resist will persist. So this means that we have to move through the problem, not just ignore it, avoid it, or complain about it, right? Let's not resist what has happened. Let's not resist the chaos. Let's not resist even the crisis. In order to move through it, we have to accept it. The second spiritual principle we learned is good enough is the enemy of the great. So often we want to just get things back the way they were. We want to be like what we were 20 years ago. We want our bodies to be healthy like they were 20 years ago. We want our lives to be like when we had a certain job or a certain relationship. Well, I don't know that you can go back again, but what I do know is that there may be opportunities that are even better if we're willing to be in that place of discomfort and chaos. So good enough can be the enemy of the great. And so instead, let's embrace some changes. Let's go with the chaos in a new direction because we may reach higher levels of the good life. And then the third principle that we learned today is just if I'm going to worry, let me worry about everything going right. What a blessing it is to think maybe everything will just go right. Okay, so I do like to assign a bit of homework. And so your homework this week is to really think about chaos and crisis as a leverage for opportunity. So the next time you find yourself just in the middle of something that's confusing or disordered, think about, wait a minute, maybe I can approach this a little differently. Maybe even a crisis doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be something horrible that happens. Maybe I have the opportunity to look at chaos and crisis a little differently. So your homework this week is when you find yourself in chaos or crisis, think, is there another way? Could a different choice bring you something even better than the way things were before? All right. Well, it's been a lovely treat to be with you. Great love to the other Reverend Larry for inviting me back. So let us pray. There is one power, one presence, one light, one wonderful thing. And I call that thing a spirit, but what I know that thing is everything. So that includes me. I know that God's love is my love. I know that God's health is my health. I know that the joy of God and the abundance of God and every bit of God is also in me and for me to enjoy. And as it is true for me, I know it is true for everyone within the hearing of my voice. Everyone is entitled to those same aspects of God, the love, the joy, the peace, the harmony, the order. And so for this week and beyond, I know that when faced with a crisis, each one of us has the chance to see through it, to accept it, and to move through it into an opportunity. I know that each one of us can have another way of looking at chaos and not see it as a defeat, but rather as an opportunity to work through something. I know that each one of us can be willing to let go of what's good enough and accept something maybe even better, even if it is born through chaos, even if it comes about through crisis, there is good beyond. And I know that each one of us is willing to accept it. And so I'm grateful for this. I let it be. And together we say, and so it is. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you all. And especially thanks to our other Reverend Larry. Bye for now.
Wow. Reverend Larry never disappoints, does he? Such beautiful personal stories and spiritual practices for us to use. And since you did such a beautiful prayer, let me just give you your affirmation for the week. How is it I so easily, effortlessly, and willingly accept what I resist persists, see crisis as upcycled chaos, and leverage chaos and crisis into opportunity? Dr. Reverend Larry actually challenged you to think about chaos and crisis this week as leverage for opportunity. And this week, if you find yourself in chaos or crisis, ask yourself if a different choice might bring you something better than the way things were before. And as always, I invite you to commit to doing some spiritual practices that help you embrace this chaos is truly crisis plus opportunity. I so appreciate everybody that donates and all of the money that's coming in to help us pay for our computer and to stay in business. So thank you very much. Enjoy our offertory song.